Welcome to the Kaldheim Rules video. My name is Nelson.
And I'm Serge. Let's go over the new and returning mechanics.
Do you love Morph, but think it's a little unfair that only creatures get to disguise themselves? Well, good news! Foretell is here, and it's time for more face-down shenanigans. Foretell is a keyword that functions while the card is in a player's hand. Anytime a player has priority during their turn, that player may pay 2 and exile a card with Foretell from their hand face down. If the player does, that player may look at that card and they may cast it after the current turn has ended by paying any Foretell cost it has rather than paying that spell's mana cost.
Exiling a card using its Foretell ability is a special action which doesn't use the stack. That means you can do so anytime you have priority during your turn, including in response to spells and abilities. Once you announce you're taking the action, no other player can respond by trying to remove the card from your hand.
Casting a Foretell card from exile follows the timing rules for that card. If it's an instant, you can cast it as soon as the next player's turn. If it's not an instant or it doesn't have flash, you'll have to wait until your next turn to cast it. If you're casting a Foretell card from exile for its Foretell cost, you can't choose to cast it for any other alternative costs. You can, however, pay additional costs, such as Kicker. If the card has any mandatory additional costs, those must be paid to cast the spell. If a player leaves the game, and at the end of each game, all face-down foretold cards that player owns must be revealed to all players.
We all know math is for blockers. Want to make that math even more complicated? With Boast, attacking opens up a whole new world of possibilities. Boast means activate this ability only if this creature attacked this turn, and only once each turn. A Boast ability can be activated at any point after the creature with that ability has been declared as an attacker. This can be before blockers are declared, after blockers are declared but before combat damage is dealt, after combat damage is dealt, during the post-combat main phase, during the end step, or in some unusual cases, during the cleanup step.
If it's not your turn and you gain control of a creature with a Boast ability after that creature attacked, you can activate that creature's Boast ability if it hasn't been activated yet that turn.
If a creature with a Boast ability is put onto the battlefield attacking, it was never declared as an attacker. Its Boast ability can't be activated that turn. If an effect adds additional combat phases to a turn and a creature with a Boast ability attacks more than once during that turn, its Boast ability can still only be activated once.
Modal double-faced cards are back and more powerful than ever. In Zendikar Rising, they always had a land on one side. In Kaldheim, you've got even more flexibility with a spell on each side. Each face of a double-faced card has its own set of characteristics: name, types, subtypes, abilities, and so on. While a double-faced card is on the stack or battlefield, consider only the characteristics of the face that's currently up. The other set of characteristics is ignored. While a double-faced card isn't on the stack or battlefield, consider only the characteristics of its front face.
If an effect allows you to play a land or cast a spell from among a group of cards, you may play or cast a modal double-faced card with any face that fits the criteria of that effect. If an effect allows you to put a card with particular characteristics onto the battlefield without instructing you to play or cast it, you consider only the characteristics of a modal double-faced card's front face to see if it qualifies. If it does, it enters the battlefield with its front face up.
The converted mana cost of a modal double-faced card is based on the characteristics of the face that's being considered. On the stack or the battlefield, consider whichever face is up. In all other zones, consider only the front face.
One of my personal favorite mechanics, Sagas, are back. These are powerful enchantments, and they tell a story. The rules for Sagas haven't changed since their last appearance. As a Saga enters the battlefield, its controller puts a lore counter on it. As your pre-combat main phase begins, immediately after your draw step, you put another lore counter on each Saga you control. Putting a lore counter on a Saga in either of these ways doesn't use the stack. Each symbol on the left of a Saga's text box represents a chapter ability. A chapter ability is a triggered ability that triggers when a lore counter that is put on the Saga causes the number of lore counters to become equal to or greater than the ability's chapter number. Chapter abilities are put onto the stack and may be responded to.
A chapter ability doesn't trigger if a lore counter is put on a Saga that already had a number of lore counters greater than or equal to that chapter's number. For example, the third lore counter put on a saga causes the Chapter 3 ability to trigger, but Chapters 1 and 2 won't trigger again. Once a chapter ability has triggered, the ability on the stack won't be affected if the saga gains or loses counters, or if it leaves the battlefield.
Removing lore counters won't cause a previous chapter ability to trigger. If lore counters are removed from a saga, the appropriate chapter ability will trigger again when the saga receives more lore counters. Once the number of lore counters on a saga is greater than or equal to the greatest number among its chapter abilities, the saga's controller sacrifices it as soon as its chapter ability has left the stack, most likely by resolving or being countered. This state-based action doesn't use the stack.
Kaldheim seems like it would be an intense plane with all the battles and fighting, but it's actually really chill, because Snow is back. Snow is a super type, not a card type. It has no rules, meaning, or function by itself, but spells and abilities may refer to it. The S symbol is a generic mana symbol. It represents a cost that can be paid by 1 mana that was produced by a snow source. That mana can be any color or colorless. Snow is not a type of mana. If an effect says you may spend mana as though it were any type, you cannot pay for S using mana that was not produced by a snow source.
That's it for the rules.
Thanks for watching.